All right. So today we are going to look at fetch, how we can use fetch to do an API in the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP, MySQL environment. So in this environment, how would we use fetch to transfer data across our applications? Is that okay? So fetch or what is fetch? So fetch, the API, provides a JavaScript interface for accessing and manipulating parts of the protocol, that is the internet protocol, such as making requests and receiving responses. It provides a global fetch method that provides an easy, logical way to fetch resources asynchronously over the network. What does asynchronous fetch mean? What does this mean? So if you are saying that a type of fetch is asynchronous, it means that the activity that is being performed should be performed in an orderly manner, in which if I have sent something and have not received a request back, I shouldn't continue with my code. Or my code should not be the steps in my code should not be followed because I have not completed the fetch activity in which I am doing. I don't know how to break it down, but if I am sending information, okay, so I'm sending information. The idea is that I would send it and then I will receive a response from where I am sending the information. So until I send and receive a response, the program should wait for me to receive the response before it continues. Because if I send and the program continues, maybe it needs the response to do a certain computation. And until that computation has arrived, I cannot continue with what I am doing. Hence, I need to wait for me to receive a response before I can continue with what I am doing. Does that make sense?
Yes, please.
So, unlike HTTPML, that is a callback-based API, Fetch is a promise-based API and provides a better alternative that can easily be used in a service workers. Fetch also integrates advanced HTTP concepts such as CORS and other extensions of HTTP. Fetch deals with a promise-based approach. What is a promise-based approach in Fetch? So here, in other words, if I make a promise to you, it means I must fulfill the promise before I can do anything in which I want to do. So here I'm saying that okay, I'm making a promise that this will happen. Now, if it doesn't happen, then do this. But if it does happen, then do that. So here, when you use a promise-based approach, you can control all eventualities of your application goods, of your application sending information. That is, if I send information, I have made a promise that I am sending information and I will receive a callback. If the callback doesn't come, then I have to do some certain pieces of code because the callback doesn't come. But if it comes, then I'll run my code as it normally should be. Hence, the promise-based approach allows you to take into consideration what happens if there is a failure. That is, the server is off, or the server is malfunctioning, or the information you are gathering is not there, so on and so forth. What do we do in such scenarios? So that is the promise-based approach. So in other words, the global fetch method starts the process of fetching a resource from the network, returning a promise that it is fulfilled once the resource is available. The promise resolves to the response object representing the response of the request. So as I said, I am making a promise that I would receive something. If I receive it, I will do the things I'm doing. But the joy of this is that it knows you may not receive the promise. So if you do not receive it, it also has contingency plans for you so that you would be able to do whatever you want to do if you do not receive the promise in which you are looking for. Now, the basic structure of a fetch statement is like this. So here I have a function. Now, the function starts off with the keyword function. Since it is a JavaScript function, let me put this in a JavaScript code so that we can see it with the colors instead. That is more profound. So here, let me just say API example, and then open this. If you have a question, just pause me and ask me.
All right, please.
So test.js. So in here, I have put in this. It is basically based on this structure. And in this structure, we have a function called log movies. And this job is to go and fetch information from this interface, that is this address. That means that if I go to this address in my browser, I should see some information over there. And the information in which I see there, I should be able to go and fetch it as a JSON file. So this is for examination purposes. You do not have direct access here. So here, I can't access directly from here. But if I am to run this piece of code in which we have over here, so if I go to run without debugging, I want you to run in Edge. you would see a pop-up very soon. Where is the pop-up? Did they run? That's come here. Oh, sorry. You can't just run the JavaScript like that. You'll have to run it through a HTML page. So here, let me have the body of a HTML page. And then over here, let me have script, SRC, test, close this. Good. So now I can run this. Great. And of course, we said that the thing should appear in console. So console, we should start seeing requests over here. I'm sure the link doesn't have anything, but the idea is that we would go for information over here. And then once we get the information from here, we would use the response to put the information in something called movies, and then we'll have movies. Now, I have done the function here. So of course, for me to see it in action, I would have to call upon the method itself. So we calling upon the method. Okay, so it is telling me that I don't have the rights to access this. And again, it is something I picked from online. So I don't have the rights for it. And it is giving me these responses. So it's working basically. But the idea again is this. The async over here tells the computer that I am running this in order. So when you get here, make sure that this is performed in the order that it is in. And if you're not done performing this, do not move on. Over here, the waiting here tells the computer that we are waiting for the fetch function to go, do its job, and return. Until it has returned, do not go to line 3. So when we go to the fetch function and it does its job, the answers go to what? Response. In response, there are so many things there. So response allows us to fetch all the information that we have gone for from the server over here. So response now becomes an object. Why? Because it has numerous things in it. It has the information about if it was a success, if it wasn't a success, the origins, the time in which the information was spent there, all of those information would be kept in the variable we are calling response. Note that this is just the name that was given over here. It could be RSP or whatever. But so far as it is equal to fetch over here, that means that you are collecting the response that fetch is giving. In the response that fetch is given, one of them would be a JSON file that contains the information we return. So here I'm saying that when you look inside the response, go for the JSON file that is in there. The JSON file in this scenario would hold a list of movies. Hence, you can use that to go and then watch the movies in which you want to watch. So basically, this is the fundamental structure of a fetch statement. Now, we are going to rewrite all of this into a structure for us using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript so that it responds to an address we are going to create. And we are going to create an API using these languages. The first thing we would need to do is we would need to, or we are just creating a simple API to put user information into, to get user information from a server and to create a user from the server. Two things: get a user, create a user. Very, very simple. So obviously, the first thing we would have to do is have a database in which the user information will dwell. Hence, I will put on my SAMP, which is already on, and then I'll go to my localhost PHP admin. And then inside my localhost PHP admin, I would put in there the database that would hold the information in which we want to retrieve and work on. So in here, I would put in, or I would create my new database. The new database in which I am going to create is going to be called API tester. So I'm going to create. And then inside API tester, I'm going to create a table called user. In the table called user, it will have ID, name, email. And in here, I will have text. Let me use varchar, and let me use 255 here and 255 here. But of course, this would be an auto increment. And then I'll click on that to create it. So now I've created it. When I go to browse, it tells me I do not have any information in there. So I'll create some information in here. So name, let me say John Doe. And then here I'll have john.doe@gmail.com. Over here, I'll have Jane Doe. So here I'll have jane.doe@gmail.com. Just two people in our application. So I've saved this. So I'm done with the database side of my example right now. The next thing in which I need to work on would be my server side. So the interface that the person will hit so that it can do the processing to go and take the information from the database, prepare the response for the user, and reply the user. That is what I am coming to do now. Now, that piece of code is going to be PHP code. Since that piece of code is PHP code, if I come here and I create a PHP file here, it is really not relevant, because if I create a PHP file here, the person will not be able to get access to the document that I have over here, because the file must be inside the server for it to work. PHP must always be inside the what? Server. Hence, I will go and look for where my htdocs is. In my case, I'm using a server that is on my desktop. Yours would be in your drive C. And in here, I'm going to create a folder called API. And inside this folder called API, I would open it on my, or inside my VS Code. And once it is open in VS Code, I'll create a new. So I'm going to call this API.php. I could give it any name I want anyway. And then in here, I'm going to write all the PHP code I have in here. Of course, there are PHP code, hence I need to use the PHP file extension. Once I do that, in here again, I'm going to start off by telling it that it is going to use header content type application /JSON. So this piece of coded line tells the computer that this file is going to be displayed or outputted as a JSON file. Very important, because that is how we are going to collect the information in the fetch method. That is how we get the information we require from the fetch. So we have to tell the computer that, hey, the information here is going to be in a JSON file. Can I go on?
Yes, please.
The next thing I have to do is I have to create the connection to the database. So over here, I would create my server name, which will be equal to localhost, my username, which would be equal to root, my password, which would be nothing, the database name of my application, which would be API test. I think that is what we called it, right?
Yeah.
No, it's API tester. Tester. And then now I can create the connection to the database, which would be my SQLi underscore connect. Server name, username, password, and then the database name. So now I have a connection to the database. Okay. Now.
So can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
So where's the connection between the PHP and the HTML?
What is the connection between the PHP and the HTML?
Yeah, in this line of code.
We haven't done the HTML part yet.
Okay.
So we would see that.
Okay.
So over here, I am going to tell the computer that if there is a request to the server, and then the request to the server has a request type, of get. Then we are going to use the get to retrieve all the users in the system. And how are we going to do this? We are going to create a variable called result. And result is equal to MySQL I_query. And we are querying using the connection to the database and the SQL statement select everything from the users table. So I am telling the computer to go and select everything. Okay, we will call it user. So here from the user table. Okay. So this piece of code would take this key, and this key contains the server, the database, and all of that. Open our database, and then this would be run, and the result of all of this would be put inside this piece of code over here for us. Now, once we go for that piece of information, we will tell the computer that it should create an array for us called users. And whilst we have rows in what we went to fetch, so MySQL I_fetch by association result. Users the array should be equal to the row that it went to fetch. And when we are done, we should echo out as a JSON encryption, a JSON encoded file, the array we created called users. So this piece of code here would take the information in the arrays and turn it into a JSON file for us. Now, else, if the information that was brought to the server came in the form of a post, if it did, then it means we want to put in particular users' information into the database. We want to put in a particular user's information into the database. One second.
Okay.
Okay. So, as I said, if it is doing that, then we want to pick information from here. And what do we need to do there? We need to, one, get the information that came as a JSON file. So we need to tell the computer that the information that came, we are creating a variable called data. The information came as a JSON file, so we want to decode it. And we want to use file_get contents to go and get the PHP .// Now, this will allow us to pick input from the body of our request. We'll see that later on, right? To allow us to get information from the body of our request. The name is equal to data square brackets name. And over
So
here,
the data you made it date.
Sorry. The data square brackets email. And then we'll have on. So result. Go to MySQL I underscore query con, comma, insert into the user table name, comma, email, values, into single quotes, $name, into single quotes, $email. So this takes care of the SQL statement that would put information into the database. Now, once it is created, we want to echo out a JSON file, so encode. And what do we want to echo out? We want to echo out the array message as the key, and then it should have the data in that key called user created successfully. So this here is the interface that the person will land. So when you land here, based on if you were a get or a post, you'd go and make some requests, create a JSON file, and reply, so on and so forth. So this takes care of our server-side interface. Now, the user's interface. What would the user see? So let's deal with that. So the user would see the code in which we have right here, right? So in the body, you would have a H1 simple API example. And over here, I will have two buttons that will both be applied using onClick. The first button would get me all users. And the second button will create a user. Over here, I would invoke it using get or user function. And over here, I would invoke it using create user. That means that I will have to have two functions whose job is to do these two things. So these two functions, as we can see, are JavaScript. Hence, I need to go to where my JavaScript is and create a function whose job is to get all users. And another function whose job is to create a particular user. Now, the thing about this is that once the users have been created, we would have to show them to the user. So I would create a div called ID output to show my answers to the individual. So here, let's start with get all users. Now, we would have to apply a function or a fetch activity. So fetch. And what am I fetching? I am going to fetch the API that I have. So over here, my API can be located at localhost/API here. Right?
Yeah.
So localhost/API. API.what.php. So this is where I'm landing. This is my landing position. Okay. Now, if I land here, okay, so here I'll bring a dot. If everything is successful over here, then the response should be response dot what? JSON. Then my user, by the way, this if it follows on over here like this, but if you do that, it becomes a bit weird. So normally you can bring it down here. So then the users should imply into bracket document dot get element by ID. And we are getting output. I think this would give me an error anyway, because I would have to give myself the right to access the file by the network. Let's run it and see. So this takes care of the display for the user
Okay.
side. Let's see. So my application is over here. Let us check the network side. Okay. So when I click on create a user, it tells me that it's not defined line 10. Okay. So it's not defined via there. Let's see why. Get all this. Yeah. Oh yes, I used S over here.
Yeah.
Here it should be get all user. Let's get all users. Okay. So now let's see. Network right here. Click here. And then I have the status 200. Okay. That. I went everything, but the response, no data resource was given to the identity. I have a console error here. Good, it was blocked. I knew this would happen. I knew this was happening. If I let it run from the source that it was in, it wouldn't be blocked. I am accessing it over a network. That's why it was blocked. I want to be as real world scenario as it is, so that you can have a feel of it. 1 second. I have to type something to unblock it. Okay. So for me to unblock it, I will have to type this piece of code at the top. So let's look at why it was blocked. You see, I will do it the way that it will unblock. But when you are trying to access a network that is not your normal network, it is assumed that that network can bring to you certain things which are bad. So that is the network that is trying to access you. So you must tell the computer that the networks that are coming is okay, they can come.
Okay.
You allow for that.
Okay.
So over here, you can see that the network of origin, which is the server, is blocking us. It's not allowing us to go and do anything with this fetch information. Now that I put that code there, if I go and try and access it again, it allows me to access it. It doesn't block me anymore. Now, that block is the computer's own inbuilt security.
Okay.
Same pattern networks. Now, that is not all that secure, but you know, it is security, so we have to mention it. But you, as the developer, will now have to say that if anybody is coming into your application and they are not coming from a particular IP or a particular address, then they shouldn't have access to your data.
Yeah.
So that is why you would see that whenever there's an API, you would see there's a username and a password. So that when it goes there and the username and the password don't match, then it bounces you back. Okay. And it's based on that username and password that you can use to bill people. For example, if let's say you have built an API for payment and you're saying that each time the person uses your application, they pay a fee. How do you know I have used it? Through your username and what? Password.
Password.
So that would keep you in check. And also we can see that once we did that and it came, look at the reply that we got over here. We got the information that is inside our what? DB. That is ID is 1, name is John Doe, email is what? John Doe at this one. Then we have ID is 2, name is what? Jane Doe, email is this one. So the information is being fetched for us as a JSON format. So we said it should be in a JSON format, so it is. Now it will be on you to take the JSON format to design a table or a panel or whatever you want to design. That is up to you. But this is how we fetch information from the system. So you can see that the HTML code is where it is. It is somewhere. The server is also somewhere. And we can go and fetch information from it back and front. Also, we have create here. So normally with the create, you would have to create what do you call that thing, bro?
A form.
A form, very good. But here we are going to assume that we have already created the form. So in here, I'm going to type in the following data. Note the difference with what I'm about to type. We can see that here, I would say constant user is equal to name Thompson, comma, email tom@gmail.com. Now, I can now do my fetch. So fetch into brackets the address that it is going to would be this. Now, another thing to note is normally you would have an interface that is like the API you have for creating people, one for getting people, one for, so they'll be going to different addresses. They will not be going to the same place. So there will be an API for only getting people into the database, fetching people, doing that. They'll be different. Okay. So here, I'm going to fetch from here, but unlike the other one, in which I just left it like this, here, I'll bring a comma and tell the computer that I am going to be fetching it from the method that is post, comma, and it needs a header of content type application /JSON. Of course, these will be in quotes. Here, there will be a comma here. And over here, there will be a comma here. And we'll tell the computer that the body is going to be JSON dot stringify into brackets the user we created here. In other words, we are sending the information inside the body of the application we are sending. So where it will go and fetch the information is inside the body tag. So we can see that here, where we have the PHP code, we can see that we are telling it to go and fetch it from the PHP input. We can only write get content from PHP input if it is inside the body. So the reason why this is there is that we are telling the computer, when you go to the body of the application, you would see this JSON file there. So go and fetch it. So you can see that when we are dealing with the get, we don't have to do that. But when we are dealing with post, because we are sending sensitive information, post is the best to use because post will secure the information. If it was get, the information will be left open. That is not secure.
Okay.
So when it comes to sensitive information, patient info, credit card info, payment info, we will send them using post. When we have to go and fetch information from the database, we would use what? Get. Because you just need an ID or something to go and what? Fetch. Now, we can use the then keyword to tell the computer the same thing that was at the top, that, hey, the information in which we are getting a response as a JSON file. And once we get the response as the JSON file, then we should go and take the information that we have gotten as the response. So over here, I'll have this. All of this again. Sorry, this is me being lazy. All of this again. But here, we do not need all of this. All we need is what? Data. Data. And why have we put data here? We have put data here because once this is executed, the computer will come into the PHP side. It will use post. It will come into this side. It will do whatever it has to do. And we save the information as what? Data. Right? As an encoded message, and we left it like this. So the information that is going to retrieve will come in as what? Data. But over here, we save the information as users. You can encode what? Users. Hence, when we came here, which is here, we fetch the information as what? Users here. Here, we are fetching it as what? Data. That's how we put it there. So that's how we fetch it over here. Now, once we do this, it means that every time we come to our page and we click on create, we would create a particular user in our database, but we have an error somewhere. So let's check where the error is. So we have post over here. Yes, there's an error there because this post here is supposed to be in what? Single quotes, and I didn't do that. So I've done that now. So when I click here, another error. So promise not defined in line, this one. So here, okay. Oh. So here. Oh, yes, the promise is not coming in as users. So I can't use users over there. It has to be what? Data. It's coming in as data. So data has to be in the parameter over here. And then we will fetch the data as data. So that's my error. I'm sorry. So now over here, I can refresh. Click on create. And you have successfully created a user. So when I go to the database, I should be seeing a new user as Thompson over there. I've even created two. And when I click on create users, I should see all of them over here appearing. Of course, I would use the JSON to arrange them well, so on and so forth. So here is what API is. This is what, whenever someone says API, this is the practical viewing of API using the HTML, PHP, whatever environment. This is what it talks about. So you can see that, but for here, where we do the create, it means we'll create a form. When you click, then we'll check, oh, is the username in the correct format, all of those things, gather them. Once we are done gathering them, then we'll come and put them in this format over here. And then we'll just send this format over here, and then it will create it for us. So that is basically how we create users in this environment. Are there any questions?
No question, but sir, please, if you can send me the video so that I can go over.
Yes, I'll send. I just remember I didn't send the other one too, so I'll send it too.
Yeah. All right, please.
I recorded this one, so.
Okay.
And I'll send you the code too.
All right.
And go over and create it yourself.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So when we come the next time, then we would build a proper application that uses the JSON to do the table and everything. And then we'll do the form and everything so that we'll see how a proper application will work using this method. Then we can do updates and all of those things. Then when we are done with that, then we can move to the Node.js one and see how we can develop a API with Node.js. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
That's fine.
All right. Enjoy your Sunday.
All right, sir. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
So we'll meet on Tuesday.
Yeah, on Tuesday.
Okay. Yes, please. Thank you. Bye.